21. Pardon?
When you propose, you give your name, please.
So can I have some nominations for chair, please?
Jenny's
Yeah.
got a hand up.
Dave Hodgkinson. I'd like to nominate Terry Jeremy.
Thank you.
Is there a seconder for Terry?
Yeah, Councillor Harvey, I'll do that.
Thank you.
Jenny had her hand up.
I had my hand up before, before that nomination come up. I'd like to nominate Councillor Roy Brain, please.
Thank you. That's Jenny Hollis. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a seconder for Roy?
I'll second that, Brenda Cannon.
Thank you.
So can we vote on the first nomination first?
Yeah, I'll ask as we go through. Well, I think there's a two.
I should ask if there's any more nominations. Is there any more nominations? No. Okay, we'll vote on the first nomination then, please.
Can I just ask, would you vote for both of them, or it's just on the first one first?
Oh, is it easier for me? I think you should do the first nomination first and then move on to the second one, shouldn't you?
Ros?
Yeah?
It's Councillor Robinson here. The procedure we normally follow at committees, you will go through the councillors alphabetically and ask them who they're actually voting for.
Yeah.
Okay, so what?
So that's what I'm going to do. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to call out the names. There's two visitors. One of them is obviously the mayor, who can vote, and the other is Stuart Wright, who can't as a visitor. But I'll count now. I'll start now going through on alphabetical. So, Councillor Bretto, would you like to vote for Roy Brame or Terry Jeremy, please?
I'm voting for Terry Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Roy, who would you like to vote for?
I'll vote for me, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brindle?
Terry Jeremy.
Thank you. Councillor Canham?
Roy Brain, please.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford?
Roy Brain.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Councillor Jeremy, please.
Councillor Jeremy, was that?
Yes, yeah.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Hodgkinson?
Terry Jeremy.
Thank you. Councillor Hollis?
Councillor Brain.
Thank you. Councillor James?
Councillor Brain, please.
Thank you. Councillor Jeremy?
I voted for myself, please.
Thank you. And Councillor Robinson?
Okay. It's a tricky one because both councillors are both capable, very capable. I'm actually going to vote for Councillor Jeremy on the basis that Councillor Brame is actually chair of personnel, which is a sizable committee to chair anyway, and quite a key committee. So I'm going to vote for Councillor Jeremy.
Terry, can I hand over to you for the appointment of the vice chair?
Lovely, thank you very much, Ros, and thank you to those members that voted for me. I'm very grateful. Before we move on to the vice chair nomination, I just wanted to say thank you really on behalf of the committee to Brenda. Brenda's been chair of ALP for more years than I can remember at this moment in time, but quite a few years, and I know she's put a lot of hours of work into the ALP committee. So I just think it's appropriate that we acknowledge that and give thanks to Brenda. So moving on to the second part of that agenda item then, to receive nominations for vice chair, please. And are there any nominations, please?
I'd like to say Brenda Cannon, please.
Thank you.
Councillor James will second that proposal.
Thank you.
Hi, I would like to nominate Councillor Hodgkinson.
Thank you.
Is there a seconder, please, for Councillor Hodgkinson?
Yeah, I'll second that. Councillor Harvey.
Okay, so we do the same thing again. Is
Can,
there any
can I
other?
just say that I didn't hear who the first nomination was? I didn't hear the name properly.
Carla Barreto for Councillor Hodgkinson.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
we've got two nominees for Vice Chair. We've got Brenda Canham and Dave Hodgkinson, and Chris will call the roll. If you vote for which one of those you'd like for Vice Chair, please.
So, Councillor Barreto.
Councillor Hodgkinson, please.
Thank you. Councillor Brahim.
Councillor Canham, please.
Thank you. Councillor Brindle.
Councillor Hodgkinson.
Councillor Canham.
I suppose I better vote for myself.
Yourself, yeah. Councillor Crawford.
Brenda, please.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Dave Hodgkinson.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgkinson.
I'll vote for myself, please.
Thank you. Councillor Hollis.
Brenda, please.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Councillor Canham, please.
Thank you. Councillor Jeremy.
Dave Hodgkinson, please.
Thank you. And Councillor Robinson.
I echo Terry's comments actually regarding Brenda's stewardship, but I'm also keen to see new councillors develop, and Councillor Hodgkinson has been a welcome addition to the council, so I think I will support Councillor Hodgkinson.
Thank you. I'm just going to count now. Won't be a moment. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry. 1,
It's Councillor Hodgkinson.
4. Yes. Yes. Let me just check again because I've got too many initials here. So, 2.
We'll buy you a calculator, Chris.
Yes. Yes, it's certainly Councillor Hodgkinson.
Yeah, I worked it out days ago.
Okay. Are you happy with that, Chris?
6-5. It's the same as before. Funny enough, oddly enough.
Lovely. Thank you. So congratulations to Dave and commiserations to Brenda.
Thank you very much.
Okay, if we move on, please, to item 93/20, are there any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest, please? None. Just to say, my chat function does work, so if you do want to speak and contribute, please just indicate in the chat box and I'll make a note and call you in turn. That should work hopefully well today. Moving on then to 94/20, apologies for absence, Chris.
No, we're a full committee today.
Lovely. We like a full house.
Yes.
Moving on to 95/20 minutes. So to confirm the minutes of the committee's meeting held on the 21st of May, already received by council. Are you all happy that they're an accurate record?
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed. I'm not seeing anyone indicate to the otherwise.
Agreed.
Agreed. Lovely. Thank you very much. Moving on to 96/20, then action points and updates. I think this is where we hand over to you, Ros, for your actions, which are on my screen and hopefully everybody else's screen as well.
So in terms of the memorial edition, advertised, apologies about the spelling mistake, that was rectified, but nobody's objected. We've had pretty much positive support for that. We've got a cost for the edition, which is 394.33, which we can do hopefully before VJ Day. They've said that they can do it. So the tender for the Guildhall ramp is being delayed because we're waiting for building control approval, but we want to get that tender as soon as possible so it can run on from doing the internal improvements. King Square, we put the planters temporarily, the ones that were in the Guildhall, in front of the Guildhall, in the fountain to see what it would look like. There's a picture there for people who haven't managed to. It would be interesting to get some feedback on those. What did you think, folks?
Stuart Wright, please.
Thank you, Terry. Yes, Ros, I think it's, you know, a short-term measure is great to get that area a bit of colour, and it improves it no end. What I would like to have seen is the spouts removed, and obviously in due course a blanking plate where that drain was, to try and erase from people's memory the running sore that it was once a fountain. I think, you know, it's, you know, almost there, but I think we just need a little bit more to do it, and I presume that will happen in the next phase.
Yeah, definitely. And the idea was, let's put them in temporarily, let people have a look to see whether they think they work, because the idea is that we're going to put a heritage notice board above those planters, so you'll be able to see it from both sides, and potentially, because the electrics are there, we can put a digital screen within the heritage notice board as money allows. That's the proposals from the working group anyway.
Any other feedback for Ros about King Street Square specifically? No, good news. Glad to see some action there.
Harriet and Martineau play area, we've got the 2 extra pieces of equipment, and I've set up a meeting group and invited Carla, Dave and Jen and the residents to discuss how we go forward with that.
Lovely. Thank you, Ros. Anyone got any other comments to make on action points and updates? I think some good bits progressing there, despite COVID and everything else. No, lovely. Thank you, Ros. Next one then, 97, health and safety. Have you got anything to bring to us, Ros?
Not particularly, that's not covered under the other items on the agenda, but if anybody else.
Chris, I don't know if you want to, Chris Harvey that is, I don't know if you want to add anything here, or was it covered later on? Are you happy?
Yeah, I'm happy. We can cover later.
Lovely, thank you. 9820, small grants. I believe we've got a couple of applications.
We gave, just to say, we gave £293.20 to the Barnum Cross Action Group for their coronavirus help activities. That comes under Fulmerston Church as well, doesn't it? So that sort of thing. And we have a request for a small grant for 150 for the Norwich Road Residents Association for planters to brighten up the town.
Okay, that one was circulated. Does anyone have any questions, or do we need to actually vote on that, Ros, or just note?
Yes, please, just a quick vote.
Okay, anyone got any questions before we move to the vote? I was interested, Ros, they're only applying for 150 when they were eligible to apply for up to 300. Were they aware of that?
Yes, I think so. They had 300 last time, so.
Okay, good. Okay, I don't see anybody indicating, so if we move to the vote on that one.
That means you can call out Councillor Jeremy, Chair.
Yes, please, Chris.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got you. Councillor Beretta, in favour?
Favour.
Thank you. Councillor Brahim? Come back to Councillor Brindle?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Canham?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford?
For.
Councillor Harvey?
Agreed.
Councillor Hodgkinson?
Agreed.
Councillor Hollis?
Agree.
Councillor James?
Sorry, agreed.
Councillor Jeremy?
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Robinson? That's unanimous anyway, folks.
Lovely. Thank you all very much. That's good to support them. Are there any other community grants for us that we need to be aware of, or are we happy to move on?
Happy to move on.
Okay, 9920 then is countryside report, and there's a couple of different items under this heading. So if we receive each of them in turn, and then I'll take questions and comments on each one, otherwise it'll get a bit confusing. So the first one is to receive Mark Webster's report. So I guess I'm handing over to you now, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll go through the report and then we can consider the two consultations at the end. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to my screen so I can actually read it. I'm not sure whether anybody else can actually read that too well, but I'm just going to sort of go through this verbally, and hopefully you'll Chris will pretty much keep track of where I am. So just to go through sort of site by site. The Ford Meadow and Nuns Bridges Lady Gentle Meadow section to start with. The scrape's now starting to look sort of quite nice. It's greening over nicely. Remains to be seen what's going to come up in that middle area. Should be quite an interesting wildflower patch. It is now sort of dried out, but still quite damp, so it should be quite an interesting damp meadow. In the area around it, the Tower Mustard, which a lot of people may have seen in quite a few other sites, is doing particularly well this year. So that's one of the rarest plants we have in the town. So really good to see that. The avenue of plane trees is also sort of again greening over after that was sort of we had the digger sunk into there at one point. But that's the path looks is nice and passable now. We have had one or two issues with people sort of swinging on branches, I think, possibly, or grabbing them for their dogs. I'm not sure, but I'm trying to keep on top of that. Historic England have now granted scheduled monument consent for the hedging along Mill Lane and Nuns Bridges Road. I'm seeing a hand up. I don't know whether, Chair, you want to take that hand up now, or are we waiting to the end for questions?
I think if we wait to the end, Mark, and then we'll have some comments on the report as a whole, just to keep it easier.
Okay,
I have noted you, Brenda. I'll pick you up first at the end.
Right, thank you. So so the volunteer group have been working on Ford Meadow. We've cleared out an area where there's a big willow tree that's been a sort of big magnet for antisocial behaviour, drinking particularly. Lots and lots of beer cans coming out of there. We're aware it's an ongoing problem, but hopefully the sort of increased visibility of that site will make it less attractive for some of those problem activities. And the new contractor, ID Verdi, grounds maintenance contractor, are going to be strimming the path. In fact, they're probably doing it right now through Ford Meadow. We're aware they've become sort of quite sort of narrow in places because of the vegetation along there, which I've been doing my best to keep on track of the sort of worst bits, but hopefully they will now be strimming all through there to keep that nice and open and give people room to pass without being too close to each other. As I said, Historic England have granted the permission for the hedging along Mill Lane and Nuns Bridges Road, so I'm going to be looking to source free trees for the winter to do that. The Mill Lane poplar tree, we are looking at getting that done very much sooner than later. We've got our third quote in now for that, so we are hopefully going to move as swiftly as possible to actually choose the best quote to get that very large poplar, which is apparently really quite hollow inside, cut down to a size where it's no longer a danger to the public as soon as possible. I have had a good go at the green bridge over the river to try and get a lot of the algae and sort of slime off that. And I certainly think it's looking a lot better now, so that's good. And I've also put signs on that actually now to, again, encourage people to keep their sort of distance as they go across that. Barn Cross, so we've got grazing going on quite along there. There doesn't seem to have been any real problems with interaction with the public. We do think we have lost a couple of lambs, which was reported to the grazier, and he's dealt with that. So if people do see any problems with any of the livestock, either they're in any distress or anything, please do let us know, and we can get that dealt with quickly. And we've also made sure that there is now the lower paddock, the small little triangular area where the actual sort of Barnum Cross was, is now all chained up and stopping unauthorised vehicle access. We have had a few issues with tents and encampments and parties and bonfires. We are very worried about the site because it's very vulnerable to fire in particular. You may have seen we have already, really quite early in the year, lost quite a sizable patch of gorse and broom to a sort of uncontrolled fire. Hopefully you're now seeing, if you see at the bottom of your right-hand page there, that we are sort of clearing that area up and trying to make the best of it. We're actually not just removing the burnt material, but actually scraping off the burnt topsoil and getting back to the sand. And that'll be another valuable patch of bare ground, which a lot of the real rare Breckland wildflowers really do like that. So hopefully we'll make the best of that. And we've got the volunteers. I've been out this morning pulling ragwort just to make sure that we don't have an issue with what is a notifiable weed coming the site, basically just becoming too dominant in the site. I'm also going to look to try and improve access across some of the ditches. You have to sort of go up and down a kind of steep slope. So I'm going to look to sort of put in steps or ramps as appropriate. And as some of you may have seen on Facebook, the Breckland Flora Group are planting a couple of the rarer species that have been lost from the site, and they're actually reintroducing them, the perennial narwhal and the field wormwood, onto Barnum Cross Common. So it'd be really nice to hopefully they will be re-established. Melford Common and Castle Park, next one's up. Is it Chris in control? If you can go on to the next page, whoever, or is that Roz? Whoever's got control of the, yep, that's the one. Thank you. So, yep, there's been the tree that's been bothering us for quite a long time on the corner of Park View has been dealt with, and they've also been working the tree surgeons in Castle Lane and tidying up all the remaining piles that have been left there. I've actually managed to use some of those piles for sort of both Thomas Paine Walk and Ramsey Close. Historic England have also granted a scheduled monument position for the hedge along where the new roll top black fencing is along Castle Lane. So again, I'm looking to sort of try and start on that over the winter. Ramsey Close, not a great deal to report, but the wildflower meadow there is looking really nice, and ID Verdi will be again working this week to cut the football area and the path around the site. Dane Close, with planters are looking good there, just improves the look of the place as you're going to the shop, so it's just really nice to see a little bit of colour there. Fredericks Woods, again, we are always keeping an eye on any dangerous trees, so if people do see anything that they think looks problematic, please do let us know, because we cannot be everywhere all the time, so we do often rely on reports from the public to let us know of anything that's changed, in addition to our contract with the company who do regular tree inspections. But again, if anything crops up in between those inspections and you think it needs to be looked at, please do let us know. We've got a nice picture there, hopefully, yeah, your top right, which shows the sort of the wildflowers and shrubs at the entrance alongside the covert, and we'll be back sort of trying to keep that nicely weeded and looking good. I think we might need to go on to the next page now for Main Street Woods. Oh no, it's bottom right. Again, you might not be able to see this, so hopefully you will have had a chance to look at this beforehand. But Main Street Woods, we've been sort of keeping an eye on the rubbish situation there. We've trimmed the hornbeam hedge. Our new externally funded tools have been very welcome with the volunteers to get some new sort of very sharp-edged loppers and such like. And that hedge now should bush out nicely rather than getting all straggly before it's winter cut. The wildflower meadow there is looking superb. It's really interesting that there has been a quite well-trodden path across it. So people are sort of walking through the meadow and into the woods, which is really nice to see, because they were, until the volunteers made those paths through the woods last year, the woodland was pretty inaccessible, and people wouldn't have gone in there. So it's really nice to see that being regularly used and enjoyed. And there is there's a couple of particularly rare and interesting plants in that area that we're really keen to encourage. Onto the next page now, onto school plane. Yep, super. So unfortunately, the wildflower strip that we did sow in there, the spring bulbs that we sowed got a chance to flower, but then contractors hadn't been told, but didn't realise it was there. So I put that, if you're wondering what the line and white posts are there, that's just to mark the edge of that wildflower strip along the edge of that site. Yeah, we do have a little bit of an issue with somebody clearing the whole shrubbery and sort of just leaving it as a sort of dead ground area, but hopefully that will be resolved in time. Another thing you may have seen as you go around the town, little signs leading to Thomas Paine Walk. So we've got the volunteers back there to give the path again a little makeover. It's nicely log lined and nicely hoed and raked now. And there is a little sort of a sign at each end that encourages people to use that, which is really nice. It's still very much with the idea that we can use that as a sort of tourist feature, and that there will be aspects of Thomas Paine's life reflected along that pathway. We are sort of, I understand, awaiting sort of market towns funding on that potentially, but actually the little signs that we've put on either end, they're only about 20 quid each, and we could install some more of those sort of halfway along the route, and so the sort of the idea of the walk being in the steps of Thomas Paine and reflecting his life story is something that we could do on a sort of lower budget basis while we await sort of more extensive funding for that site potentially. So that's something I think we can investigate in the coming months. Rich Leeson Road consultation and the sculpture trail consultation. I think we'll sort of come back to those potentially, shall we? Because we're going to look at those in more detail in a minute. So just to complete the countryside report, we'll go past all of the maps of the sculpture trail and so forth. And if we just go back to on the bottom right of your screen at the moment, there's we did put out a nice sort of set of stones. This was part of the sort of effort to try and reach people during COVID-19, where we had some painted stones, some of which had the rainbow symbol that was everywhere, some which had little animals rather nicely drawn on them. And we put those around for people to find, and it had little advice on how to get help if you needed it on them. And they went all around various sites all around the town. So hopefully we did reach quite a few people who were just out and about enjoying the wildlife sites during the lockdown. Volunteer group is back. We are now, if we go on to the next page, if we could, either Chris or Roz. The volunteer group is now back. Obviously, we're happy to do this in a restricted way. We've only got a maximum of 5 volunteers plus me to make the sort of 6 that was in line with the instructions at the time. We are sort of sticking to that for the moment because it's nice and easy to manage, and we can do it at a 2 metre social distance, and we have to avoid sharing tools and such like. So it is slightly awkward in some ways, but it's really good to have that back, and people I know are really enjoying it and have missed it very much so. So we are sort of doing quite a lot of work on Barnum Cross at the moment, as I said, pulling ragwort and so forth. For the first time in quite a while, there are some potential dates for your diary. And again, this is sort of second wave permitting, but for the Heritage Open Days weekend in September, there are going to be a series of events that can sort of hopefully run. They are sort of manageable, again, with the social distancing regulations in mind, so they're all limited numbers, and we can sort of manage that without creating some kind of unmanageable gathering. So those are there for you. So that completes the Countryside Officer's report. I think there's a series of questions before we go on to the consultations. Is that right?
Yes, please. Thank you for that, Mark. That's really encouraging. Just a bit of housekeeping before I move on. If you are not speaking, committee members, if you could mute your microphone, particularly if you tap your keyboard as heavily as I do, because I can hear a lot of keyboard tapping as the speaker's going there. So if you could mute yourself. So I've got a number of speakers, Brenda, Jane, Mike, Chris, Dennis and Stuart. If anyone else wants to contribute, please add into the chat, but we'll take Brenda first, please.
Yeah, it's 2 points, not about the report, because I know it inside out anyway now. The first one, the volunteers. Is there any way that we can sort of give them a restricted picnic while they're working? Because they have worked really hard over the last year. And I just think, sometimes it's nice to pay back. And the other point is just a question, really. I spoke to you about that bridge. Did you find it, Mark?
Okay. Yeah. So the volunteers picnic idea. I think it seems a bit ungenerous, but I think we might, for the moment, still have to look at a sort of bring your own thing. But it is a really nice idea, and we definitely owe them a huge sort of vote of thanks. And I believe at the last meeting of this committee that was actually officially issued, wasn't it? So yeah, I'll look at as soon as we can, and as soon as we feel safe to do so, some kind of sort of catered event outside at a distance. I think that's really nice, and I would never refuse any opportunity to say thanks to our brilliant volunteers who do so much, and at the moment they aren't even getting a cup of tea for it. So yeah, I really like that idea. The bridge, I think are you referring to the Ford Meadow footbridge, I think. In which case, Roger has been having a look at it. We agreed between us. We'll probably have to do a sort of plywood cover of the missing plank. It's a hole in the bridge, isn't it? That we were talking about. Yeah. So that he is on the case, and in fact, I think he's actually buying the timber today if he can actually get hold of it from one of the timber merchants. It's obviously a bit problematic at the moment, but yeah, I'm going to have a look at it later today just to check on the situation. But yeah, that is in progress, I think.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Brenda. Moving on to Jane, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Two questions, really, please, Mark. Barnham Cross Common, the burnt areas. Given the recent national focus that there's been on barbecues and increased numbers of people out in our beautiful countryside, can we do an educational campaign about discouraging use of open fires, barbecues and that side of thing? And then my second question is in relation to School Plain. Have we and how have we actively engaged with that resident in question, please?
Okay. So first question, the barbecues, I've been a little reluctant to really sort of put stuff out on Facebook and campaigns like that because of the fear that it might just give people the idea, and it just sort of encourages, oh, that's an idea, I might go and do that. I have actually put up signs on every entrance to Barnham Cross saying no barbecues. I'm still prepared to consider the idea, so yeah, that's what people want. I'm instinctively a little reluctant to sort of really put that out there to people who haven't sort of already arrived, that barbecues are a thing that is happening on Barnham Cross and shouldn't. I did put a thing out on Facebook yesterday about the burnt area and explaining what we were doing there, which sort of made passing reference to I was worried about reckless fire, I think, but. I mean, I wouldn't rule it out, but I would be a little cautious. That's all I think about that. We'd have to be sort of very carefully phrased. School Plain, I have had sort of, when we first were going to do this, we did leaflets or flyer through every household in there. The resident in question has complained about us, the way that we did the scrape. Sort of was apparently putting earth on top of where she'd planted wildflowers. Now this is public land; it's not their garden, so it has been sort of a little bit problematic. And we have had numerous sort of conversations with them. And so far, I haven't actually sort of gone so far as to say, please back off. This is public land. I've sort of tried to sort of keep a peaceful approach, and for the moment, I still think that's probably the best bet, is just to stay back and allow things to go, and maybe sort of help plant some extra stuff on that section with them over the winter, hopefully. So I'm still hoping we can have a sort of a nice peaceful outcome on that without having to get heavy-handed. But I just thought I'd flag that up at this stage, that we have got this problem of sort of encroachment potentially, or wishing to treat the bit next to your garden as your garden. which can be sort of a bit problematic. But yeah, as I said, hopefully we can resolve that. And as I say, it's a real shame that the meadow did get sort of blitzed at an early stage in the year by a sort of contractor who hadn't realised perhaps that was where they were supposed to stop. But you know, that once that starts looking really good again, I think hopefully the situation will resolve itself.
Lovely, thank you for those, Jane. Next in the list, we've got Mike Brindle, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two brief comments. First, one is to congratulate Mark on the improvement to the avenue of plane trees that the Thetford Society put in. I think you mentioned it, but it really is a huge difference gained at a small cost, so that's great. And also, just to comment again, Mark, as a compliment really on the success of the volunteer scheme. It's not always easy to get volunteers in Thetford, lots of volunteers required around the town, and you've got a great number, so that's really well done. I wanted to make a point about the riverside litter, which I think is something you referred to, but wonder whether there's anything more we can do. It's been in our minutes before and we struggle with it, particularly in two places. One at Nuns Bridges, where the litter bins have been overflowing for some time. It does seem to be difficult to get the contractors on behalf of Bretland to recognise that there may be some issue about whether they're provided emptied often enough, particularly at the busy times of the year, which is now. And secondly, I think you might have referred to this, just can tell me if you did, what I call the beach, which is on Barnham Common, where the common meets the river. So you'd access it by walking alongside Nunnery Drive and keeping left all the time, and finally you come to the river. A lot of litter there in the last few days. It's been used as a kind of swimming pool. On the positive, so what, if anything, can we do about it? Clearly, we can't put a litter bin there. Maybe a sign or something to try and encourage people to take litter home. It's mostly cans, I'm afraid. And just to add finally to that, I've been on Barnham Common a lot in the last few weeks, and I'm not currently seeing new barbecue sites. So maybe that's a slight encouragement. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, well, thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, I think the Nuns Bridges area is looking really nice. We've tried to keep that sort of nicely trimmed in places and allow sort of longer vegetation in others. The volunteer scheme, I'm really just, as I say, I'm so chuffed with that. It's so unfortunate, as with so many things about when COVID starting, when it did, just as a volunteer group, numbers were really getting good and sort of about 12 a time. And we are sort of having to ration it a bit now, and some people are in the higher risk groups, of course, and therefore shouldn't still be joining us. But it's really great to see it going up again, and you know, as soon as we can, we will be sort of more widely publicising it. At the moment, I am, as I said, literally sticking to our regulars, and that's enough for what we can do at the moment. But they do make a brilliant impact. Riverside litter, I mean, one particular sort of resident does sort of very much keep reporting this to me. I am aware of it, and it's great to see so many extra people really using the Nuns Bridges and other areas and Barnham Cross. You know, one of the things about lockdowns meant a lot more people are using those areas. With regard to the Bretland bins, there is a link which, you know, either myself or Ros can send round perhaps, and if you could encourage people to use it, there is a report it on the Bretland website for full bins, and I think the more that we make really full use of that, the more people, the message will get through to them that that's something that needs attention. So perhaps we could circulate that link and really try and get people to use it and sort of keep the pressure up on that. With regards to the beach, yeah, I think a sign definitely worth a try. I mean, I have a feeling it may end up in the river, but it's definitely worth a try. And I have actually made a point of showing the ID Verdi new grounds contractor staff that area as a hotspot. And to be fair to them, they are quite regularly collecting in that area, and they have been on top of that as far as possible. When I've been round there have been occasions when there's been litter, but actually not that much all the time. So I mean, they definitely are sort of on the case with that area. But again, if you do see it looking bad, then please do let me know. I mean, I'm also aware that several members of the public or residents do sort of unofficially help out by sort of tidying up in that area as well. But it is getting a lot of pressure, and yeah, I mean, it's great to see that there aren't so many barbecues happening, perhaps, but I've still seen a few, and we were made aware by a resident that they reported one to the fire brigade because it was still burning in the morning I think it was last Friday. So yeah, again, if any sort of signs of fire, please do either let us know or just go straight to the fire brigade if it looks like if there's naked flames of any sort at the time on site. That'd be great. We were actually asked by a film company whether we could, have a filming on Barn Cross recently. Normally the sort of thing we'd be delighted to do, but they wanted to sort of set some pyrotechnics off. And even though that would be sort of very closely controlled by a professional company, we felt it was just sending out completely the wrong message at the moment, which is a real shame, as I said, that we weren't able to do that. But yeah, it's sort of any kind of flames on the common at the moment is a real risk. So yeah, as I said, please do let us know of any problems you see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. Just very quickly on the bins, that is within my Breckland area, that side of the river, and I did contact Breckland last week and highlight that actually this is an annual issue. The frequency does need to be increased, but I definitely support your suggestion, Mark, of using the report it function to get it attended to, because if it's overflowing the bin, more often than not, it flows into the river. So that's an obvious one there to tackle. Chris Crimmon, just to note that Mark Robinson's text me, Councillor Robinson's text to say that something's popped up, and so he has actually left the meeting, but he did text me, so you may want to record that in the minutes. Next on my list, I've got Councillor Chris Harvey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a cracking report, Mark. As you know, I'm reticent about putting hedging along the riverside. I thought we were going to take this out for consultation to the public.
Yeah, as I understand it, I just think that is still the case. Yeah, no, sorry if I implied that was an open and shut case. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously slightly problematic in terms of any sort of social gatherings at the moment, but yeah, we can certainly do that via online, via a surveying monkey and sort of other methods that that you might want, basically. Whether you want to sort of restrict it to people in a particular geographical area or just the whole town is up to you, really.
No, be the whole town because it affects everyone.
So should I take it that councillors would like to go ahead with the online sort of survey on those, or well, that and Castle Park for that matter, sort of as soon as possible or when we can?
I assume everyone's generally happy with that. If not, perhaps people could indicate, but I think there's probably consensus for that.
Okay.
We've got Dennis Crawford next, please.
Yep. Hi. I'd like two things to say, really. One, where we're taking all these trees out because, well, health and safety reasons, mostly we're taking them out. Are we replacing them with anything? And the next thing is a comment on the Thomas Paine Trail. I think it's a really good idea if we put up some more signs to give a little bit of history behind Thomas Paine on that trail, because I've walked it before I went into lockdown, and I think it would be very useful and attractive to tourists in the town. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. On the subject of the of replacing the trees, we did plant 3,000 trees last winter, some of which were in Frederickswood, which is one of the sites I mentioned. And again, obviously, we just mentioned sort of Nuns Bridges there as a potential site for replacing trees. Obviously, our tree planting has been really badly hit by the extreme hot and dry weather of April and May, hottest April and May on record. So that's been really problematic. So we are looking at having to replace quite a lot of those, particularly the ones that were in open areas. But in sites like Frederickswood, where there's been cover, a bit of shade, they are doing quite nicely. So we've certainly, in terms of numbers, we're more than replacing things that we're having to take out. Obviously, it takes 300 or 400 years to replace it as a same value of amenity, unfortunately. But there isn't really an obvious sort of shortcut to that one. So yes, we're definitely looking to make a net gain in trees over the next few years and as far as possible make that a really significant net gain.
Chair, can I come back on that?
Sure.
My concerns are that we seem to be losing quite a few mature trees on areas like Castle Park and everything, and we don't seem to be replacing any there. I mean, I know it's going to take a considerable amount of time, and I won't be around to see them in full growth. But I do think it's important that we maintain some trees on Castle Park, and we seem just to be cutting down and not replacing.
Yeah, on the subject of Castle Park specifically, that's because it's as part of the scheduled ancient monument, and it's been made quite clear to us we wouldn't get permission to plant new standard trees, if you like, because of the concerns that the root damage would do. Now, I have my own feelings on that, but that's historic England, and it's beyond our scope to argue with that, unfortunately. So Castle Park itself, one of the reasons we looked at hedging for Castle Park and for that matter Nuns Bridges rather than trees is, as I said, we simply wouldn't get permission to plant full-size trees. That was made quite clear to us at the site meeting we had with James from Historic England. So I'm pleased we're able to get some cover at least on the site, but it would have to be managed as hedging rather than trees, unfortunately. So on some sites we are, I'm afraid, inevitably going to lose, and on other sites we're going to gain a lot more. So hopefully, and overall, it's an increase in tree cover and trees. Thomas Paine Trail, yeah, I'm very keen on that idea, and I think Councillor Wright is probably the best place to sort of give me the most the accurate historical information about Thomas Paine's life. Although other contributions are very welcome, of course. But yeah, if you're happy for me to go ahead with that, I'm certainly keen to sort of put in a few more of those sort of signs, sort of 2 or 3 of them perhaps along the route to mark key points in his life or key aspects that he achieved.
I think it'd probably be a good idea to involve Thomas Paine Society as well, Mark. They'd probably be chuffed to be asked, to be honest with you, so that'd be good. Thank you for that, Dennis. Next on the list is Stuart Wright, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, following on from the hedging thing, I'm sorry I haven't been up to speed with the proposal on the Mill Lane hedging. But I presume it's to stop people parking on the green area along Mill Lane there.
Yeah.
I have a concern that if it gets too high, then we'll lose the vista of the Nuns Bridges. Hedging is an extra maintenance job that we have to do. The Lady Gentle Meadow is an example where the hedge has been put in across by the fencing. If the hedge is kept down to 2 or 3 feet and stops cars, yes, okay. But if it gets much higher than that, you lose the vista, and then you get the health and safety issues of antisocial behaviour hiding up behind the hedge. So I do think we need to look at that again just before we consider what we are finally going to put in there. Thomas Paine land I was going to talk about. Mark, you alluded to the fact there was a Market Town funding. I did put a bid in, if you recollect. I came to the council to ask if they would support the idea, which you duly did. I put the bid in, and 2 weeks later Bretton pulled the money, so there was no money coming forward on that. So we're at, probably down to back where we were, so some temporary signs, I think, yes, would be good. To prove the point, I think the idea I had was some etched paving slabs, which I think we can probably work towards in due course. But if we get temporary signs in there, raising awareness of the trail and Thomas Paine will be a quick win that we can do. I do think the area closest by the roadside could benefit with lopping down a little. I think the Bretland or the Serco, whoever is doing the cutting now, have cut the grass a bit wider swathe, which is great. But the next level probably needs to be smaller shrubs and flowers, so you can see through the area to stop any antisocial behaviour. And we did have an incident where a tent was camping there during last week so. So I think if I can work with our Mark about putting some information together, put some signs, that would be great. And then on Ford Meadow, I'm just concerned that the temporary fix we had with the water going down the middle channel is starting to erode a little, and I just wonder if it's a stitch in time job we can get down there and stop it washing away before the final solution's put in, because I do notice water levels are starting to drop through the coffee mill again. And I think if it's the sake of a few temporary logs down at that temporary fix by the little footbridge, that will buy us some time. But maybe we can get together and have a look at that, Mark.
Yeah, so Nuns Bridges, the Nuns Bridges hedging, it was in the application that it would be no more than a metre high, but yeah, we could look at whatever height limit you want to see, and that would be fine. Yep, Thomas Payne duly noted, and we'll look to do some more of the signs and open it out a little bit in places. I can't spend too much time on that site, but yeah, we can do a little more. I did trim back about a metre further than was previously done. Ford Meadow, the erosion by the footbridge. I did ask quite a while back in whether the Environment Agency would accept some extra sandbags in there. I mean, nothing really came of that. I don't think they would necessarily be opposed in principle into us just sort of protecting that bridge, but it does need to go ahead with their full participation and approval. We can't just sort of do things that we think are right on that. So yeah, I'll get back to the EA and say, we would like to just make sure that area around the footbridge doesn't sort of further erode, and see if we can take action on that.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of those, Stuart. Just before I bring Mike in, Carla, just so I've noted your message there, and hopefully Chris Crimmin has.
Yes, I have. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. So that ends all of the original speakers, but I think, Mike, you wanted to come back on one of the points that was raised there.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. It was really to do with the area at Nuns Bridges and Mill Lane, and the concern about the consultation there. I think we must have a consultation. It's right that the public should make the final decision in effect or have a very strong influence on it. But I do have a concern about the tendency of most people to go for the status quo, however bad that might be. So we've seen that at Liberty Gardens recently. We saw that with the animals on Barnum Common. Nobody wanted animals on Barnum Common. Put animals on, what happens? Nobody wants them to go away. That's the way the public work. And we need to recognise that when we put out consultations. So we need to have a degree of patience and determination. One day recently, I found 25 cars along there, 12 in the car park, which was great, 13 along the riverside. You couldn't see the river. You just could not see the river for cars. That was exceptional. We need to do something about that area with a low hedge, as been pointed out by various parties. Quite right, it must be low. I think if we're desperate for car parking space, and I don't want to stop the public enjoying the river, that's the whole point of having the river. Riversides are precious. They should not be car parks. They should be anything but car parks. They're the most important sites in our town. However, people do need to get there. They do need to carry their picnics and so on, a swimming kit. So a bit of an improvement by accident. One day I walked along there and there were cars parked on the other side of Mill Lane. That's to say the side where there's grass running up to Nunsgate. And that was so much less spoiling the view. It was just, people seem to have taken it into their heads on that day to do a good thing. And I thought that was really great. So maybe we need to think again about the amount of parking space we provide. Perhaps there isn't quite enough for the hot days of summer. And that would be a possible alternative. It would be better than putting them all along the actual riverbank itself, which I think should be avoided throughout the town at all cost. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we can look at options for that. And I think even if we put the hedging in, we could put it slightly further back to allow sort of slightly off road parking, sort of parallel to the road, or possibly sort of right angles to it or herringbone to it, perhaps. So, I mean, yes, we can look at certain options for that. But I agree that we'd like to see people being able to access the area, but without sort of eroding it or covering it. I actually saw a sort of a tent and a very large series of tents, in effect, on the other side that you mentioned there last week, and I was a bit worried we were going to end up with basically a free festival sort of taking over the site. So yeah, I do think there needs to be some control there to stop it sort of becoming sort of a bit like the Wild West, but at the same time we don't want to sort of remove people's access to the river. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mark. Mike, do you just want to come back very quickly?
Yeah, I'll be very grateful. Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just a bit of concern about one thing that Mark said then, which was, I think that the hedge would be set back from the edge of the road to allow parking on that side. To me, that virtually defeats the whole. That defeats the whole object of it. If we need to have car parking, can we consider putting it on the other side of the road, which, as I've said recently, seems to be happening occasionally and is less detrimental to the riverside?
Perhaps I need to come back with a set of maps, or we could go straight to the consultation with maps showing the various options.
I think we possibly need a sort of just a separate discussion sometime. We're not going to solve it now, but if you outline some initial ideas, Mark, and circulate around by email, it's something Mike's passionate about. I know a number of others are, and we're not going to solve it today, but we'll pick it up in due course. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else indicate. Jane, I note your comment there, which is fine. Just a general observation from me, Mark. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for fielding those questions. I think it shows just sort of how passionate councillors are about the issues that you've dealt with, given the number and sort of range of questions that have been raised today. The thing that really struck out for me this month with the report was virtually every area you referenced either volunteers helping with physical conservation, or volunteers helping with the watering of plants, or sort of people looking after little patches, if you like. So there's quite a lot of widespread engagement, which is really encouraging, not just the conservation but the engagement side, which is good. Barbecues is still an issue, so I sort of welcome Jane's suggestion of a bit of publicity around not just barbecues, but if people dispose of glass bottles and on sort of some of the dry patches of the common, it's perfect sort of ignition. Just yesterday when walking my parents' dog, I picked up a barbecue, one of the ones, and those that tend to have barbecues tend to be reckless enough to also leave all of their rubbish, of course, as was the case yesterday. So it's often a sort of multiple of issues. But I was pleased to see all the signage go up within days of the last out meeting about barbecues. So that's really encouraging. Right, cool. I think that deals with that agenda item, or the first part anyway. So we'll move on to the sculpture trail consultation, and I think probably Mark, you'll talk us through the results from the survey.
Okay, so we've got people might know the background for this. It's part of the Brexfen Edge and Rivers project, which the Town Council is one of the partners. Part of which we've been making a sort of short film about the river and its history, which is being edited now. Another part of that project, a very wide-ranging project, is to put in a sculpture trail around the town. So we have had a public consultation about what sort of types of sculptures and how the whole thing should look, what its theme should be, which I think Ros will cover in a minute. What we've done recently is checked the originally suggested route for the trail, which I think some of you might have seen. But the original route went right round the town, from the town centre right out to Main Street Woods, and then sort of down through some of the shelter belts, right across to Barnham Cross Common, and then back up towards Nuns Bridges and the town centre that way. What we found when we came to that is that was sort of not passable. It was completely blocked in an area just past Main Street on the way to the industrial estates there. So what we did, we actually managed to find a new route, a new sort of longer route round the sort of going right round the town, including sort of Barnham Cross, but going via the cemetery through sort of, so instead of going out as far as Main Street Woods and where the Premier Inn is, this would then basically cut through the Redcastle plantation, go up the slopes there, through the cemetery and past the Charles Burrell Centre, which enables the cafe there to be a very useful pit stop for people on that route. But at the same time as we have that longer route, we looked at we realised that route was never going to be passable, fully passable for wheelchairs or pushchairs. So we've looked at a much shorter wheelchair-friendly route, which concentrates around the town centre. Now, hopefully you're looking, so the middle page of that, the bottom half of that is the town centre route there, which does cover a lot of the existing statues and artworks around the town, and we could also add some additional ones in there as well, and there's obviously plenty of opportunities for refreshments and things along that route. So there are possible extensions to that, a couple of possible extensions out to the sort of west of the core area, if you like, potentially. The only thing about those is that we wouldn't have sort of permission for murals on that Breckland land there as things stand, and it's been a sort of long slow process trying to get such permission. So there's no guarantee we'd be able to do that. Those extensions with sculptures on them, that would be sort of, you might have to rely on sort of more just the fact that there's nice natural areas to add to that theme. So it's more that core area in the middle of town definitely seems like a really nice sort of possible sort of family-friendly, pushchair-friendly, wheelchair-friendly route. And then a walker's route, which is sort of significantly longer. It adds up to about 6 miles potentially. And then if you look at the series of maps you've got there, as I said, it goes sort of up through the Redcastle plantation, past the Redcastle family school, through the cemetery with a possible option to go by Kim's Belt instead. But I mean, this is something that the cemetery committee will have to look at. But I know we've been looking to try and get a memorial garden area for the cemetery for some time, and we could, as part of this project, get in funding for an artwork, a sculpture to help kickstart that potentially. So that's something I wouldn't want to prejudge, because it's something we'd still need to take to the cemetery committee. But it does give us a possible alternative, an option. So a nice green space and a place where we might be able to put in a new sculpture. And then, as I say, it would go past the Charles Burrell Centre, actually where there's a little kind of suggested possible alternative route near the Charles Burrell Centre, which is actually, I think, a better route. It just sort of cuts that corner and comes out nicely where the existing sort of industrial sculpture or historic feature is on the other side of the road from Charles Burrell. The route could then go past there, and it basically goes sort of down right through Barnham Cross and sort of back up along the river of Barnham Cross. Something that occurred to me recently is I wonder if we're not missing a trick by sort of trying to include the Barnham Cross, actually, or some kind of rejuvenation for the Barnham Cross in all this. But I think, Stan, the idea would be to have one sculpture on the west side of Barnham Cross, and I think one or two on the eastern side of it, and then that links back via sort of Nunsbridges Road to Nunsbridges, back along sort of past Button Island, and of course Prince Dulwich Sing, and back into the town centre that way. So, as I say, there are a few options there, but that does give us a sort of a viable route that we know has been sort of basically ground truthed and is sort of feasible and does have quite a lot of interest on it. So I don't know whether you want to sort of have questions or comments on the routes before we move on to the sort of types of sculpture themes, or.
Yeah. Oh, well done, Jane. I wasn't seeing anyone indicate, and then James just popped up, please.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for having to leave the meeting for a moment. I like the idea of incorporating the feature that's in the garden across the road from the Charles Burrell Centre. I think that's a really good idea and links in with that heritage aspect. So I think that's a really good option. And I love the idea in terms of the reference for the longer opportunity walk of encompassing the actual Barnham Cross. I think that would be a fantastic option. And I agree that a shorter, I wanted to call it a toddle, but that's not really fair on wheelchair users and that kind of thing. But that shorter route, I think, would be extremely useful to give everybody the opportunity to engage with what wonderful things we have on offer in Thetford. Thank you.
Okay, great.
You're happy to know that, Mark? Yep.
Yeah, that certainly chimes with how I feel about it. So it's good to know. Is that the sort of general feeling that the route, as suggested, is good, or are there any alternative ideas? Or
a few other speakers, so I'm sure they'll say if they do have.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, go ahead.
So we'll take Stuart Wright next, please.
Thank you, Terry. Yes, it's right that we put a wheelchair-friendly route in, and really pleased that that's being considered. Just point on your map there, Mark, St Peter's stained glass. I expect that's meant to be St Cuthbert's rather than St Peter's.
I have a mental block about those two. I'm always in the wrong around. Sorry.
In generally that they're not too bad a wheelchair. I'm just conscious of drop curbs and that around the town. We seem to be very poor at that, but on that particular route, it doesn't look too bad. I would welcome the idea of coming out onto the Abbey because it's so often forgotten about, but it does also link to our riverside further west, and we're trying to promote the riverside. So giving wheelchairs an option to go out there would be great. There are a couple of trees that could be carved out in that area, which I think, I don't know where we are in terms of the BFER funding and that, but I talked to Ros a while back when there's options of chainsaw sculpture happening, where we've got subjects we could incorporate those. So that would be great if we could. The underpass murals at the Priory definitely need a good old clean up if they're going to be included. Hopefully they're going to be cleaned up even if they're not included, but that's by the by. Barnum Cross, yes, the stump is still there in the trees, and I would love to see some kind of interpretation board put there. There's one out just north of Weeting about a wayside cross there, and an interpretation panel which has been done, I think, with the Brecks previously. So I think, even if we can't afford a sculpture at the site, an interpretation of the Barnum Cross would be welcomed at that, given that it is at the extremity of the walk, to give people a bit more interest as they make their way back. I do believe we're missing an opportunity a little if we are coming through Redcastle. It's been long held passion of mine to try and get some more interpretation about the Redcastle site and also the Viking Ditch and Bank, which came from there along through the cemetery and down to the Nuns Bridges site. So I think, again, 2 interpretation panels, both for Redcastle and the Viking Ditch and Bank, keeping people's interest as they go along the route would be really worthwhile incorporating. So I think that's probably the only other thing was about what leaflet we're looking to do in terms of this, because if we are doing leaflets, then we just need to be mindful of our other suite of leaflets, so how they fit with those if we're looking at a similar format. And maybe there's something we can speak to Leaping Hare about, because I think we don't want to be a hodgepodge of different leaflets as a town. We need to try and look at a bit more of a corporate image as a town if we're offering these things to people. Thank you.
Yeah, that all sounds good. I don't think I sort of need to add anything further to that. I think we'd probably agree with all of that, or be able to take action on that.
Thank you. I think, Roy, you're just making a note there. Hopefully, Roy, you're still with us and you can see the screen okay. The screen's gone black again. Okay, I'll move on. Hopefully Roy's there or not. Dave Hodgkinson, next please. Are you with us, Dave?
Yeah, I have a problem with unmuting. I've done it now. Mine's going to be very, very short because Stuart's just taken both of the things I was going to bring up. I endorse what he says about the Barnum Cross. That would be great to have some interpretation there, and also about the Saxon Bank, which so that's me really. Stuart said it much better than I did.
Short and sweet. Thank you, Dave. Has anyone else got any observations? Particularly keen, if you're still there, Brenda and Jenny, I know this was something you've worked on for a lot of years. If you have any observations and sort of general happiness about what's being proposed. If I'm looking at chat, I can't see the participants list, so I'm not sure if you're still there. Okay, possibly not. Just some points from myself then, Mark, before we move on. Just about the Redcastle Mound, it used to be the case that all of that's owned by Breckland, and they did have some money set aside not so long ago to do some maintenance there, which I don't think ever got spent. And I was really keen for Breckland to do more to promote that, because it's quite historically significant. So I'm quite happy to do some work at Breckland to see if they want to contribute to that element at all, because it is a key part of Thetford. Really pleased to see the Charles Burrell sculpture brought into this. That was actually a project which I developed when I worked at Keystone as a community worker. So if you want any background information, pictures, there's an interpretation panel there already. I've got the original drawings and designs and the community consultation that went ahead, so I'm quite happy to share all of that. Just along the actual sculpture trails themselves, particular bugbear of mine is street furniture, and I know it's on the agenda later, but if we can make a really conscious effort when we go live with the trails that all street furniture along the route, bins, benches, that sort of thing, look good. If we're encouraging people to walk along these routes, and they are lovely routes to walk along, we want it looking good. Completely agree with Stuart's points about branding and distribution. This is a continuation of other trails and tourism projects, if you like, in Thetford. So engagement with people that do this day in, day out is really key, and we want to sort of keep with the branding if we can to make it consistent. And I just wonder, Mark, if the survey monkey responses was great, as a lot of people got involved. Did we have any direct consultation with groups as such? Because I know some people independently got involved in the consultation, but did we sort of go to anybody specific? I'm thinking people like the River Group, Riversdale, who obviously feature along the river there. Any specific group consultation which could add a bit more of a sort of qualitative response?
I must admit, I'm not aware of that. I don't know whether Ros can add anything to that, whether we have or.
Yes, we had conversations with both Keystone and Charles Burrell and asked them to complete the consultation, which is why we changed the route to do the loop to include the Charles Burrell Centre, because they were saying put us in as a T-stop. So yeah, and Keystone as well. And we talked about Riversdale potentially being a launch point for being able to give out leaflets and things. So yeah, so
No, that's great, Ros. That's really encouraging, because obviously we want the sort of quantity responses from the survey monkey, but the sort of quality ones from direct organisation engagement, I think, is really useful information sometimes. So.
We also sort of asked for ideas for sculptures during the consultation as well. We really only had one community entry, which is lovely, which we need to include in the trail somewhere. But we had two artists that came forward as well. One who works in recycled materials, which I think was a link through the River Group, which was great. And then the other one was a mural artist based in Thetford, and they showed us a mural that they'd done, which was lovely as well. I think what would be good to take forward sort of the BFER trail and Mark's, two proposed routes is to set up a small working group. And Stuart did some work on the Boudica statue and stuff. So we've kind of got stuff in the wings ready to go. And it might be nice to have a small working group of councillors just to take that forward if anyone was interested. Yeah,
I think that's a really good suggestion, because it's a big project, and I'm sure Mark would appreciate a bit of extra support from councillors to take it forward. So we'll finish the discussion off, and then we'll get nominations for whoever wants to take part, if that's okay. I've got two more hands up. Firstly, Brenda.
I've been thinking about this trial, and what we haven't done is we haven't included the grammar school, which could have something. They might do it themselves, but I'm sure Stuart can sort that one out for us, because they could actually have something in their gardens at the front. But in general, I'm pleased with the way that the trial's going. So looking forward to seeing it. And just to say, Mark, I have still got them animals if you still need them. What Roger made.
Oh, you've got those, right? Okay, right.
Yeah.
Wonder where those are. Yeah, I'm sure we'll definitely use the animals. Yeah, I mean the grammar school is I mean it is basically on the route of the sort of the wheelchair friendly trail, isn't it? The first map, which I mean, as I say, it's quite difficult to see it. The resolution you've got on your screens there. Yeah, it's certainly very much close to where that core route is, I think. So yeah, if they were interested in hosting something, I'm sure we could look at that.
Brilliant. Thank you for that suggestion, Brenda. And lastly, Mike Brindle, please.
Thanks, Terry. Just a quick one to enlighten my ignorance, if possible. I can't remember, and I should do. Have we got a proposal for a sculpture of Boudica anywhere? And if not, why not?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there is. I mean, Ros and Stuart Wright might know more about this, but yeah, Boudica is definitely sort of one of the prime movers of this originally, wasn't it? And this might come up when we look at the results of the Survey Monkey on whether what people wanted to have in there as well, I think.
Okay, Stuart, you wanted to reply?
Yeah, just to say that we did explore the Boudica site and we looked at the big tree by Nuns Bridges, and we actually met with chainsaw sculptors Ros, myself, and John Newton, and hopefully that will come to pass as quite a key part of it. I need to catch up with Ros of where we are and how we go about that. But the theft site did, and it has still earmarked £1,000 towards that project.
Brilliant, thank you. So I think one of the actions from this is to form a working group, Mark, to work alongside you to take this forward. Are there any other decisions you need the ALP committee to make today other than that? Just to sort of note and confirm we're happy, really.
Yeah, with regards to the route, yes, I think it's just to make sure that we are happy with the way forward, and the working group can then sort of tweak the exact route and sort of look into that. But I think we're also looking at the sort of themes for the sculptures, which I think Ros is going to go through the details from the Survey Monkey.
I think we should do that through the working group, because there's quite a lot to go into, really.
Okay, sure, yeah.
I'm happy with that. I mean, I think you've got the views of quite a few committee members today, and we've had a good chat about it. But on the screen, I can see that there's Dave, Jane, and Stuart wanting to join the working group. Are there any other members of ALP that want to join that?
Three seems like a good
yeah,
number.
three's a good number, and it's a good spread across town, I think, with those three. So if we take those three forward, and then if you sort of keep me in the loop as chair, I'd be grateful. And then leave it to you, Mark, to work with those three and come back to ALP as you see necessary. But I think you've got quite widespread support for the proposals there, which is a really positive piece of work.
Super, thanks.
Okay, unless there's any other thing on sculpture, we'll move on to feedback from the Richard Easton Estate consultation, please.
Yeah, well, I think you've all had, hopefully, the various documents on this, and yeah, I mean, a lot's been said on this already. I don't propose to add any sort of further to the existing information you've been given. So, yeah, it's over to you, Chair and Councillors, to take forward, really, and choose a way forward.
Thank you. Chris Harvey, did I miss you from the last discussion, or you got your hands up already for this one?
For this one, please, Mr. Chair, I forgot to begin. I have a non-pecuniary interest here. My stepson lives on Stuffton Close.
Okay, noted. And unless you live there, we're happy with that.
And so are they.
So we're noted. No, we'll note that. Thank you. We've been sent this in advance. Do any committee members have any questions or comments from what we've been sent in advance? There's sort of quite a lot to digest. Just see if anyone's responding. No, well, what I would say as chair, I just sort of thank you to everybody from the public that responded. I'm not sure, Mark, this is probably our most responded to consultation that we've done in terms of sort of surveys. There's a lot of information there to read through, so it's always good that the public have got engaged, which is good. based on the responses to the consultation, do officers have a suggested response? Are we going to stick with the proposal or amend it? I think there was sort of a compromise muted, and I'm not sure of the results from the site visit that took place last week, so we might want to comment on that as well.
We can give you an update on the site visit.
You could, Jeff. Unfortunately,
yeah. I just want to clarify, there were 2 consultation surveys done. The residents did one of their own, which they did do door to door and interviewed people. And then we had we did ours, which was sort of more about the different options, really.
Yeah, so certainly from the site meeting that we had on the Friday, I think it would be broadly accepted if we had a small circular sort of, controlled, if you like, area that could be kept, with particular reference to the bee orchids there. They certainly seem to have generated a lot of interest. A lot of people are very keen to see them. If we had a sort of, we were looking, I think, an area of a radius of about 3 meters, so sort of 3 meters in all directions. Sort of, this would be in the kind of southwest corner of the main site of Richard Easton Road. That seemed, as I said, I think would be broadly accepted. And would give sort of a small area where we would have the potential for bee orchids and other wildflowers to thrive, but in a sort of clearly defined and limited way. The other things that were proposed that sort of seem to have been broadly accepted are some planting of spring bulbs, more wider planting of spring bulbs around trees and such like, and including under the trees at the 2 sort of smaller green spaces, Stamford Road and Snunston Close, and also the planting of a sort of limited number of sort of ornamental, possibly fruit trees, but certainly ornamental trees to provide a bit of nectar and blossom, again at the sort of main site, Richard Easton Road. So I suppose if you're looking for options, we could propose that, and you could sort of ask for reactions to that, Jim.
Yes, I'm happy with that. I did take the time to go up there in my own time and have a look. My own view was our initial proposal was sort of an ideal, if you like, sort of perhaps taking over too much of the site. So it's a balance between the environment and the sort of needs of the people that live there, which I think is really important. So I'm happy if we arrive at a compromise which the committee are happy with and the residents are happy with, and that seems to be what your suggestion we've arrived at. So as long as the committee are happy with that. I've got Jane wanting to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we actually have, therefore, a detailed compromise that we can actually consult with the residents on? Because I think, to be honest, we can't say yay or nay until we have that actual piece sitting in front of us, and I apologise if I've missed that. I think we need to be very, very specific as a council, because we are very, very passionate and keen when we have planning applications come in that there is not a loss of amenity land. And it's been very evident through the conversations that have prompted from this consultation that the residents feel that they are losing a piece of amenity land, and we need to preserve that in the best way forward. So whilst I completely agree that there is a compromise to be made and we've had it outlined, I would like, as always, the devil's in the detail, and I would like, personally, I would prefer to see a detailed compromise paper come out that we can then consult with those residents on. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a couple of other speakers, Mark, so I'll take them and then we'll sort of see where we're at. Ros, did you want to add anything to that? I see your hand up.
I was going to say what Jane said, so I think it's
I
very
agree
important. It's been very heated, and we need to take the heat out of the situation. And you know, I think that the residents are looking for the committee to say, well, at the moment we're not going to mow, we're not going to leave it unmown, and we're going to look at the suggestions that have come back in the survey, and then put together a detailed proposal. Really.
No, I agree. It's important we get it right.
Yeah.
Mike Brindle, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I do think that Jane and Ross have themselves, in what they said, taken quite a lot of feet out, because I was concerned a moment ago that we were going to go ahead at this point. I don't think we're ready for that yet. I think what's happened is we've got a bit of a learning situation here for ourselves. We undertook a very thorough consultation, which perhaps had, I'll overstate the case and call it a fatal flaw, which is that we didn't limit it to the people most concerned, which is the inhabitants of Liberty Gardens. Most consultations are fairly general. So the one about the Mill Lane, Nuns Bridges one is for anyone. I agree with what Chris suggested on that, but this is very specific. The main people who are going to use the amenity land on the Liberty Gardens estate are the residents of Liberty Gardens, and they really do need to get a feeling at the end that we've not only consulted them thoroughly, but that we've listened as well. And I do personally hope there'll be a good compromise, but I do think it's right that we should re-engage with them and say, we've listened to everyone. We feel we've met the concerns of both the surveys. How do you feel about this proposal? And see if we can get a bit more of those, a few more of those at least, who were against it, to now say, yes, I can see the point of a sensible compromise.
Okay, thank you. And Stuart Wright, please.
Yes, not really reinvent the wheel, but yes, I think it's the way forward is to make sure the residents are happy with the compromise position. I've always cited that estate as being quite a nice mix of different types of building and an airy feel of having an open space there for residents to use. And in these times where we have smaller gardens, you do need to have a little bit of general open space, if it's to kick a ball around with a toddler or that. Having been through those years, I do appreciate a little bit of open space, and we are under-provided with managed recreation space in the town. The rec is getting more and more fenced off just around the corner. So, you know, we do need to have these areas of open space for children to play in. So let's get the residents on board with the proposal.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. And Chris Harvey, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to say, I think we should learn lessons from this. I think we made a couple of errors here. I think we misjudged local residents' passion and we ignored the democracy at its roots. So we must not do that again.
Okay, noted. I mean, I think there are some lessons to be learned. I mean, one of the things which I think is important is when we do surveys, we have a means to identify the views of the wider community, but also the views of the people who are most directly affected. And we must work out a way to sort of separate. For me as a councillor, I would want to know general views of the whole community, but also specific views of the area. So I think that's definitely one learning opportunity. I think we've got a long way to go in terms of improvements, environmental improvements to our land across Thetford, and we want Norfolk and Breckland to adopt this approach as well. So I think there is a little bit of reflection that would be really beneficial and sort of set the scene for how we intend to go about sort of rewilding or increasing biodiversity in the future. So I'm not sure the best way to do that. I'm loath to set up multiple working groups. I don't know if you've got any views, Mark, if you're happy to look at the, crystallise the compromise solution and get it back out to residents and see if they're happy, or if you'd welcome sort of maybe 2 or 3 councillors just to sort of have a chat about that first and sort of lessons learned. How do you want to sort of take it forward?
Well, I'm perfectly happy with either of those approaches. Perhaps if you sort of have some clarity on whether you want to go back to the committee first with the detailed proposal, or the working group first, or straight to residents with that. I assume at least you want some scrutiny of what we're going to do next before it goes public.
I'll take Jane first before I reply to that.
I think we might actually say the same thing, which is quite a disturbing thought. I think it does need to come back to committee in the initial phase before it goes to the general public. We do need to scrutinise it, and we do need to be mindful that we do achieve it. But I'm very mindful that we also need to allow our officers to do their job, which is, to pull all of that together and present it to us. So I'd love to see that for the next ALP meeting, if that works in terms of workload, please.
Yeah, that should be fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Should
Yeah.
I make that an action point, Chair? That the working group comes back to the committee at the next meeting with a James nodding her head no. How would you like me to record it?
I can't. Hold on. I can't see Jane.
Grateful for small mercies, Mr. Chairman.
Good. So Jane, were you suggesting that we do have a working group and they have a sort of chat? You don't want a working group. You want it just revised proposals next month?
I think revised proposals, and we scrutinise it before it goes out to consultation with the public via this committee. I think we have, enough knowledge within this that I think, like you, I don't want too many working groups, because then we become working groups for working groups' sake, and we have a very, very capable officer that will be able to provide that service for us.
Okay. If I suggest then, Mark, that I know you're a busy chap, so that probably works best for you, that there's not sort of too much to do straight away. But if you work up some initial ideas and at some point during the month email them out to councillors as a sort of draft, we can provide our feedback in advance of the next ALP meeting, and then we can sort of not spend too much time at the meeting discussing it, but agree to what we've discussed during the month, basically.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Brilliant. I can see a few committee members on screen, just nod in general approval if you're happy with that suggestion. Good. Happy with that? Lovely, thank you very much. Does that give you everything you need, Mark, to deal with that one for the time being?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant, thank you for that. And as I say, I do think it's important we get it right, because this is the start of a many years' work, I think, undertaking this, which is really, really positive. So we want to make sure we are fully aware of what's being proposed and stuff. So. Good. So that deals with all of item 99, countryside report. Thank you for taking us through all of those, Mark. We haven't heard from Ros much today, so we'll move on to St Peter's, which I'm guessing is Ros. If you could take us through the item 100, Ros.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you're not hearing from me. Right, I am just going to my. So some councillors attended, I think, right, some councillors attended the St Peter's virtual meeting, and the consultants went through the process that they'd been through and went through some options. There were 4 or 5 options at the end, but what they'd said about those 4 or 5 options is that they haven't got enough evidence to go for funding for any of those options. So the proposal that they're suggesting as a council that we go forward with in terms of seeking funding is for a meanwhile usage. So it's a meanwhile use pilot phase. So it's sort of what the council have been doing anyway, but it's doing it in a more structured way. So the idea is that we would go to the HLF to say, this is the research we've done. This is our proposal is that to bring this building back into use, we need to work up a pilot phase where we're inviting lots of people to use the building. We engage lots of different organisations in its use. We would do that through, and if I pop on to the next slide. So the pilot phase would be a bid for up to £250,000. It would go to the 2021, and they would focus it on a COVID-19 angle, because we've actually had quite a bit of interest from schools using it because it's a bigger space as an additional classroom. That Breckland have been talking about additional space in the town centre for organisations to meet within. So they think that there could be a COVID-19 angle for it, which would be good. So they're talking about that meanwhile use having a recorded coordinator to actually develop that strategy. So you've got somebody dedicated to bringing people in and using that building. And creating 18 to 12, 18-month partners to test out. So of all the different organisations that they've talked to, because they've talked to lots of different organisations, they will pull together a group of those organisations to be in the meanwhile use team, who will look at how they get, you know, young people, old people, different audiences in the building. And then they'd evaluate the 2-year period and then create that as a business case for a bigger, larger project. And the capital works that they would include for the meanwhile use pilot phase would be the north roof, which we have to replace, the tower repairs, which are a health and safety issue, and the access. So we sort the access routes out for it. The company, who are very experienced and have done the million pound projects in town centres and stuff, are saying to us this meanwhile use pilot phase would be part of the next phase, which would be the really big bid for Thetford, which would bring together everybody really in the town into a kind of economic regeneration type bid. And they then were talking about the heritage action zones and other bits of money, because there will be a real focus on that economic development. And they were talking about the branding work that Breckland are putting out, and they, because of the work that they've done, they were interested in looking at how that branding work could incorporate what we need to do for the bigger bid, so we can actually get that branding work to do 2 things at the same time, so Breckland get bigger, you know, more for their money. So this was their kind of step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So it's all gone in terms of timescale. It's all slipped a little bit, but we're still there. So we're looking at October is when HLF are saying that they're going to open up again, but we don't know what that opening up is going to look like, because at the moment they're just focusing on COVID to save the organisations that they're working with. But from October, they've said that they'll accept new applications, but we don't know what the criteria will be for that. So the idea is that we will get our business case August really, so that we can then use that to describe what we want to do going forward. So just councillors, are you happy with that kind of meanwhile use project?
Okay, if anyone wants to speak could indicate. I've got Jane first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is actually quite an exciting opportunity, because we keep saying that we need to do something. Well, this gives us the opportunity to do something, but do lots. It's almost the equivalent of small businesses doing test trading and that kind of thing, that we are dipping our own toes, but also helping others to dip their own toes. So facilitation, and it, as you rightly say, it gives a further foundation for the major project. And I think that underpinning work will come in really, really useful. And again, keying in with the Breckland brand project and that kind of thing. It's about doing the job well once and being able to use it multiple times and build and continue to deliver. So this gives us an option for delivery, but also to dip our toe. So I would be very much in favour of this.
Lovely. Thank you, Jane. Stuart, next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Ros, may I ask a question in terms of immediate use? Is the building able to be used immediately for short-term use? And also just make a comment and make other councillors aware that that arch is the key to delivering whatever you do there, and it's great to see that you've got that on the agenda to be considered, because you need to get people in there, and the diverse range of users that were talked about at with the consultant would need a disabled friendly route, which that arch would provide. I just also want to make a point that the consultants did cite the failure of the Heritage Action Zone bid. One of the reasons was that we didn't have a conservation area appraisal done by Breckland Planning. And this is something which we've been asking for quite a while now. And I will be writing a letter to the Greater Thetford Partnership, so those members of the board who are listening today, expect that for your meeting on the 8th, and I hope you'll be able to start facilitating, because it is key to gain funding. And if we're going for this heritage funding in the future, that is something that will unlock it. Let's not shoot ourselves in the foot and not have that to start with. So thanks for that.
Okay, duly noted. Thank you, Stuart. Roy, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I've been all over the place. No pictures, no sound. It all went nuts. But I am back. Congratulations, by the way, Terry. I really don't know what's happening with this thing today, but this is one of the most important things that we can actually get involved with. I was at the meeting with this particular body, and they are so good and up to the minute with what they're doing. It is something that I think we really do need to support, and we must keep pushing Breckland for the disabled access. I know that they're now basically on board, but I will keep pushing it from my end, because I can actually see that from the shop window.
Thank you, Roy. And finally, Mike Brindle, please.
Thanks very much. I must admit, I'm torn on this issue. On the one hand, we've got in front of us a presentation which is ambitious and professional and is getting support from several councillors who've taken the issue seriously. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, you could say the whole thing is way over the top. So I'm just for a moment want to play devil's advocate, if I may. A reminder that when we took possession of this building, to do as it in a sense to do a favour to the previous owners, to preserve it with no expectation we'd necessarily make any money out of it, to say the least. We did look at the idea of it simply becoming an art gallery, and I think that would have gone ahead had the volunteers who run the previous art gallery so successfully not chosen to retire at that point. And at that point, we simply, I think, went to sleep on the thing, and now it's leapt up in front of us. We can't avoid it anymore. So, just concerned at the complication and ambition. I wonder whether it's almost too ambitious and too complicated. Step 3, undertake a feasibility study, seems to me to be the key one, but you have to get through an enormous number of things to get to that. Long list, criterion for success, RAG analysis, etc., etc. Yeah, if the feasibility study seems to show that this is actually going to work, then I would kind of reluctantly or worriedly say yes to this. I think we have need to keep our eyes open and our minds open all the time. At any time, we may need to say, no, sorry, we got it wrong, it's not going to work, or we're spending too much money, because after when you employ consultants, one of their aim is to go from plan A, which gets them 1,750 quid, to plan B, which gets them 5,000 or 10,000 quid. That's part of the deal. They are a business. So let's be very, very cautious in each step we take, please.
Okay, noted. And Brenda, please.
Yeah, gone a bit quiet here. I can remember working with Stuart, Corin and Sylvia on St Peters. This was a good few years ago. We actually had loads of things that we was going to do and ended up doing nothing. What I wouldn't like to see us happen is that we try to do all this and we actually do nothing.
Yeah,
so if we're going to do something, I think we really need to say, right, we're going to go for it and start putting it in action. Otherwise, we're going to get nowhere again. And we spent a lot of money last time.
Yeah, I agree, Brenda. Something's better than nothing this time around. We've got to get on with something. Jane, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to Mike's concerns, on one hand, if we do nothing, we're guaranteed to get nothing. So we can maintain the status quo all we like and have a crumbling building that does nothing for Thetford. I have a very, very specific question for Ros, if possible, please. Obviously, we tendered out to organisations to undertake this work for us. The steps that are included in terms of our next steps and getting to create a business case, if my recollection is correct, that was part of the original tender brief and what they were going to do for the money that we agreed, and this committee and subsequently full council agreed to and committed to. Am I correct in thinking that all of that, that's on the next steps, is part of the package that we've already signed up to? Thank you.
Yes, that's right, Jane. We get all of that with what they're currently doing for us, and what they're planning to do in their next stage is to do a lot more kind of focus groups, developing that idea of your the team taking the ideas forward of organisations in the town.
So may I come back on that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
That's Ros giving you an answer.
Oh dear, I'm in big trouble. It's my parents. Sorry. So really, if we were to pull the plug now, actually, theoretically. No, gosh, excuse me.
I think what Jane's alluding to is we have a package that we might as well see.
Sorry. Sorry, right, I'm back in the zone. So realistically, if we were to decide at this point in time that we don't want to go down this route, we would actually still be tied into that tender and that contract.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just to say, remember, Historic England are still on board with this building. You know, they have earmarked funding for us for next financial year. So we have got a sizable chunk, hopefully, of external funding. We have to put our application into them in November, but they said that they've got earmarked fund for St. Peter's. So, yeah. And that this will help enormously to you know, going forward.
Thank you, Ros. I've got two more speakers and then I'll try and wrap it up. Stuart Wright, please come back.
Yeah, just following up to Ros about whether if we did have a user tomorrow, whether they could go in there and have a casual hire type of thing. Because I think once you get it into use, then you may find potential users that be a long-term anchor tenants type of thing, which was brought out at the meeting. And just to reinforce Ros's point, she's got a good relationship with Historic England. Let's keep them on board if they are saying that this is the way forward and will free up other funding. Because when we did have the meeting with the consultant, there were other funders that were mentioned and would possibly may be able to be accessed if we went this route. So I think we're going down the right line, but just keep the flexibility.
Yep, just to say that, so the building is usable for occasional hire. The area under the north roof is a bit leaky. And the access is always going to be an issue. But yes, I think we can still use it.
Lovely. Thank you for confirming that. Councillor Hollis, please.
Sorry, I couldn't. Thank you very much. I've got a question. St. Peter's, the council have had quite a while now, haven't they? Quite a few years, yeah?
Yes.
Can anybody tell me? And you've paid, the town council paid for feasibility reports or surveyors or whatever to find out faults on the church. Exactly how much, as a guesstimate, has the town council actually spent on doing these reports? Can anybody tell me, please?
I can answer that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Am I muted myself? Okay. We received a grant for we got a grant for 38,000 from Historic England, and we spent 48 because we had to spend some of our own money to get that £38,000 grant. So far we spent 10,000 of our own money.
Does that answer your question, Jenny?
Can I come back, please?
Yeah, sure.
No, my actual question is, since the town council have, I don't expect that off the head actually, an email would be handy. How much in total for the years that the council have owned St. Peter's has it cost the council, or basically public public monies for all the different surveys and other things, please?
I've got, we did, yes, I can get that sent to you because I think I've sent it to the consultants, so they've got that information, and I think it's in one of the reports. So what I'll do is I'll send out the full slideshows for their presentations, and the one about the audience analysis and everything is really, really interesting because they went and spoke to, so I'll send out both of those presentations, Jenny, and I think the figures are in there. If not, I'll send you the original figures.
Lovely, thank you.
Cool. If you could send them to the whole committee, Ross, that'd be great, just so that we're all aware. Moving on, lastly then, Roy, please.
Thank you, Chair. I really am in support of it, and I think it's a marvellous thing that we could get all of these millions of pounds or hundreds of thousands of pounds out of the bids. I just wonder whether, whilst we're doing it, we should have a look at selling it. Why don't we put it up for sale and see what we could actually get from a developer, providing we said the outside has to stay as it is, still be iconic, and we actually might make a couple of bob.
I don't know if you want to respond to that one, Ross, but I'm not aware of anyone who would want it, Roy, put it that way.
I think that's a councillor decision.
Yeah, unless you'll make a proposal to sell it, Roy, I'm going to move on.
If you don't ask, you don't get. I mean, it's all very well to say we're looking at this, we might get funding for this, we might get funding for that. It has a value. Shouldn't we, as people who are looking after the public purse, run that as a joint operation? I mean, you say you don't know anybody who might want to buy it. What if a developer said, oh, I'll give you $750,000, I want to make it into 5 flats and keep it looking as it is? Would it be worth it?
I'll note the comment, but as I say, if I don't think the will of the council is to go down that route at the moment, but if you want to test it at some point, feel free. But for now, we'll proceed with the report and the work that we've started. But as I say, feel free to challenge that at some point. Just a couple of questions or comments really from myself. The one thing I didn't like as much with the presentation was the description "meanwhile use." It almost implies as whatever happening in the meanwhile is not really what we want, when actually there's a huge opportunity to do some really good stuff in the short term. Obviously, the long term we have lots of aspirations, but meanwhile use just sort of says to me that we're sort of treading water and not really doing what we want to be doing, which we might want to give some thought on from a sort of public relations point of view. So I'm not sure if it's a new sort of phrase in sort of bid writing world, but might want to give some thought on that. The link into COVID, I think, is a great idea because I do get copied into lots of emails about grant funding from different trusts, different bodies, and there has been a huge increase over the last few weeks of financial support available. Funders have really recognised that charities, local councils, whatever, need additional support. And to support the economy. Obviously the government yesterday was announcing different sort of emphasis on getting on with stuff. So good opportunity there from a funding point of view. And I've posted in the group chat, Ros, the Norfolk Infrastructure Fund. There's up to £1 million available for infrastructure projects across Norfolk from Norfolk County Council. And I think the potential capital improvements to St Peter's would very much fit the bill for that fund. So I'd definitely urge us to look into opportunities there, because it's a local one, and I'm sure Roy and I as county councillors would both like to see investment in Thetford from Norfolk County Council through that fund, and we could both lobby for it. One final comment, Mike Grindle, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm very concerned about a particular remark that was made earlier, I think by Jane, who said we can't do nothing. I just want to endorse that very strongly. Of course, we can't do nothing. it does strike me that it would be ironic, wouldn't it, if after all this energy has been expended, and all this hiring of consultants has taken place, we noticed that a growing town the size of Thetford, which once supported, say, an art gallery, no longer does so, and it should. We ended up with an art gallery. That would be indeed ironic. I think what I'm saying, a bit like Roy in a different way, is we don't want to close down the options. If that is, I can't believe that is too simple a solution. It looks to me like we never really tried to make it work, and I much regret that over the years that we didn't say we will have an art gallery and we will either find volunteers or provide some kind of service that enables people to see it at limited hours. There ought to be a way forward, and I'm just concerned that, as another speaker has said, we are spending a lot of money. I just wonder whether we are really sure that this is going to bring us the goods that we'd all like to see, which is a thriving, well-used building.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So the agenda item asks that we receive the details of the report, which we've received. At this stage, Ros, I assume we just note the report and accept what's there?
Yes, please, and that you're happy for us to pursue that option.
Yeah, a sort of general agreement there from the committee that we're happy with what's there. Haven't heard anything to the contrary. And the second point of that agenda item is to consider the costs for permissions for St Peter's Access Arch.
Yeah, and that basically the licence is imminent from Breckland. It's been through their committees. We wore them down after Tina wore them down 5 years of where's my arch. So that's going, we're definitely getting that now. We now need to re-put our planning permission in because it's lapsed. So this is a cost to doing the access ramp and the arch through to make the building fully accessible.
Okay, and so again, you've got the money in the budget to do that. You just want us to note that it's proceeding.
Yeah.
Lovely. Any questions on the second part there of the arch? Everyone's sort of generally happy with the update we've had. Jenny Hollis?
Thank you. Yeah, has the planning lapsed because of delays from Breckland, or has it been on our side of things, please?
Well, we put in the planning last time, but before we had permission from Breckland, and then Breckland refused to give permission. So because they said at some point they might want to use the car park for something else. But they have now agreed that we can have it and we can use it through the car park. But we went ahead with planning without having the permission beforehand.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for everyone that commented. Moving on to the next item then, we've been going 2 hours, so my intention is to try and get us wrapped up by 4:30. There's not too many more items to go. Ros, the next item is the use of open spaces post-COVID.
Just 3 amendments to the policy, really. Breckland have asked to be notified of any of big events. So to add that in, that alcohol licensing is included within our thing, and also to request COVID risk assessments. So.
Okay, lovely. Committee generally happy with that. I haven't seen any hands go up. That was circulated in advance and all seemed fairly sensible.
Yes.
Lovely. Thank you.
And then the second bit was because ALP are actually responsible for the marketplace, King Square and St Cuthbert's. I think Breckland is now approaching us about the use of King Square as potentially as a plaza for Costa's, Greg's, tall orders, and whether councillors had a view whether we should be charging for those or whether they'd be just happy to use the open spaces policy and to offer it to them free of charge. Because in terms of costs for these on our open spaces policies, we charge quite a lot for commercial, but that seems to me probably that you might want to suspend that at the moment.
My own view is I'm happy to suspend it for the time being. I think businesses have suffered enough the last few months. What do the committee feel? I've got hands up from Dennis, please.
I think my mic's on. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah, I agree with you, Chair, that I think we should suspend our charges and let these businesses get a little bit of an advantage over it. on the condition that there is no extra cost to the Thetford Council, if possible.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. Brenda?
Well, mine was on the same theme, really. We have to have their risk assessments, how they're going to handle it, how they're going to clear up when they go. I'm all for it. And providing that they're not blocking the highway, that's fine by me. Because what did worry me when Brexland was saying that, oh, we could have more tables and chairs outside, you know, King Street is not that wide, not when you get all the motor scooters up there and prams and buggies. Using King Street Square and St Cuthbert's ideal.
Brilliant. Thank you, Brenda. And Jenny, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. We need to let them spread their wings so that they can get back into some kind of business. My concern is will they be taking responsibility for the cleaning? Will they put some bins out? Will they make sure that everything's cleared away and cleaned up after them?
Yes.
I would guess that's to be dealt with in the risk assessment, Roz, as a sort of condition.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, no, I'm all for it.
Super. Sorry, did you want to reply there, Roz?
Yeah, that's all included within the open space thing. And I just wanted to mention about St Cuthbert's. That's now been completed. And we did talk about with the church there, because it's such a lovely area now. They would be very interested in using that as a kind of a courtyard garden to the church, to their new restaurant that they're planning to do. Yep. And I just wanted councillors' views on whether we'd be happy to kind of proceed on that basis.
Yep, I think there's a agreement from the committee that if we can be helpful at the moment, we should be helpful. So I'm all for that, and particularly St Cuthbert's, let's reclaim the space for something positive. Chris Harvey, agree, no cost. Dave, agree, no charge, just cover our costs. Jenny, was that something additional you wanted to add there?
Yeah, with St Cuthbert's, I've always said it. I think it's a shame the wall round that was taken down, to be honest, because that would have looked nice with the tables and chairs out and more private for the church use. So yeah, I'm happy with that one.
Brilliant. And Roy?
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, I must admit the St Cuthbert's thing, they're doing a grand job there, and it's nice to see that families are taking back the space. It's one of these things that seems to be proved all the time. If you can make it look pleasant, you can get it used, people will use it, and the unsociable side seems to disappear. They seem to go off to somewhere where they're not being overlooked. So I think this is a really good thing. I've been speaking to several people in the town centre, and they have been saying the same thing. It's time that we took our town centre back.
Lovely, thank you, Roy. So I think what I'm hearing there, Roz, is a consensus that free, if you've got clearly identifiable costs that we're incurring as a result, we would like them to try to be recovered, but the general principle is free if at all possible, and I think that would be a resolved rather than it's a policy about rather than a policy of the council, the open spaces one, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's an ALP policy.
So on that basis, I noted Jane's comment there. I think the process is if it's a policy of full council, it's a recommendation to full council, but because it's actually in our gift as the ALP committee, it's resolved.
Yeah, Tina's come back to say no. So can we make that we can't make a policy without the full council going through there? But because the marketplace has already been agreed through full council, there was no charge for that, was there?
Okay.
Can I just ask a quick question, Terry?
Yeah, sure, Brenda.
If it's in our policy that we charge for the platform area in the King Street Square normally, I think Jane's right, we need to adjust it. I wouldn't like to see this long term.
No.
That they're there, because we might need other uses. You need it for other uses. So whether we need to just tweak the policy, as Jane said, because if it's in our policy that we charge, and then a group comes along and says, wait a minute, you're not charging them, why are you charging me? So I think we need to do something with the policy.
So rather than changing, are we suspending the charges at the moment?
Well, that's really what we were arriving at, but we're being told we can't amend the policy without recommending it to council. And the frustrating thing with that is it's the 1st of July, full council's not till the end of July. So whatever we decide won't be implemented for a whole month when it could be being very useful. Roy, do you want to add something?
Yes, I was going to say, because we've used the word change, that's, I would have thought possibly had to go to full council, but would it be in our gift to suspend payment for a minimum period which is under revision? Would that come within ALP's gift rather than waiting for the full council?
Well, the town clerk's on the line. Maybe could you comment, Tina, or post in the chat in response to Roy's question there?
I wonder if we went for the 2 weeks review type thing. Oh, was Tina coming back? Because we agreed to 2 weeks review for the marketplace, whether we did it as a suspension of 2 weeks review. Is Tina going to come back on that?
I think whatever we propose to do to the policy, if the principle is that it's a recommendation to council, I don't think we can amend the policy or suspend it if it's a policy of council, because it would all be a representation or a recommendation to council. That's what I'm not clear of. I wonder if we want to make it a resolved matter subject to the town clerk looking at standing orders to see if it's permissible for us to make that decision.
Yeah, let's do that.
Dennis, did you want to just comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's such an important thing to the businesses in the town centre that if we can't do it through our committee, I would recommend we have another special council meeting to get it through, a one-item special council meeting.
Okay, well, that'd be in the gift of the mayor to decide. But if I propose that we, as a committee, resolve to make the changes as discussed, subject to confirmation that it's allowed, that we can do that under the rules, and if not, it's a recommendation to full council with the hope that a special meeting might be called to deal with it quickly.
Thank you.
Are members happy with that suggestion?
Agreed.
Yes. Yes, agreed.
Are you happy with that, Ross?
Yes, that sounds like a good flat way forward.
Covering all bases, I like that. Are there any other matters to raise? Consider ideas for usage of public space. Did that all come within that one? Or is there anything else you wanted to add to that agenda item?
No.
No. Cool. We'll move on then. Item 102, facilities opening. Fresh off last night's marathon meeting.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Ross?
Little bit disappointed because we hoped that we'd be able to be opening today or tomorrow. With some of the practical arrangements, we're going to be open on Friday. So all 3 will be open on Friday, and we're putting all those in place. So that should be. So a bit disappointed it wasn't today, because that's what we wanted to do. The other thing is we've got play parks reopening on the 4th of July. I take it that councillors do want to reopen all of the play parks.
Yeah, I mean, government advice is clear that they can reopen. I don't, unless anyone feels strongly that they should stay shut. I think the consensus would be to open them.
Yeah.
You've got to agree with the government.
The guidance about them talked about providing hand sanitizers and signage and all the other bits and pieces. There is one more unit that I've got to put on here, which is a solid steel one, which is very nice, which is 475, which is from a local provider. And I would take off option 2 from here. So there's another one for 475, which is good. I don't know why it didn't save, because I had changed it over. So the kind of consensus locally, however, is when you read through all the guidance and everything, one of the issues about children and hand sanitizers and stuff is their hands are quite sensitive, and when you're providing stuff like that, there could potential allergic reactions and things. And as children should be supervised in our play areas, as it's got that on the fences and the gates. I think, you know, probably a way forward would be to put up some proper signage that says to parents about how they should be using the play parks, which we can do. So I just, councillors' views, do we put in a sanitation unit each one, or would you go for just really good signage?
Okay, got a few hands up. Dennis, was you hands up for this one?
Yes, it was. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that if we can do it with just signage, it would be best, because if we put hand sanitizers there, unfortunately, a very small minority of the population will vandalize it and cause damage. And if it's one of the mobile ones, they will probably take it away and put it at home. But being a skeptic as I am, I think if we can get away with just signage, it'd probably be the best.
Okay, thank you. Brenda?
Well, actually, Dennis has took the words out of my mouth. Most parents, because these are toddler playgrounds, most parents take wet wipes with them, and they're just as good as what hand sanitizer are. And I think we'll be spending money because they will get vandalised.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Jane, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'm in complete agreement. The guidance actually says where practicable providing hand sanitizer, and the emphasis on automated where possible. I don't think it is really practicable to do it. And I think the point about child sensitive skin, believe it or not, they do have it, no matter how much mud they have on them. I think it's something that we do need to be mindful of. So I think the idea to support, educate and encourage is the way forward. And then in certain areas, we will have the toilets open and there will be sanitizers and wash facilities there. So we've got that element covered, certainly on Castle Park as well. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Jane. Jenny Heiss, please.
Thank you. I was going to say I have spoken to some of the mums and that, like from Drake, when I've been over there, and they were saying that they carry the sanitizer in their bags, wet wipes, as already been said. So the signage, I think, is ample, and a lot of it is, we've got to give people credit of having some common sense. So yeah, I think the signage is the way to go.
Thank you. I'm sensing a consensus here. Mike Brindle, please.
Yes, I'm going to add to the consensus, Mr. Chairman. Apart from the possibility of vandalism, which Dennis pointed out, I think there will be quite a heavy wastage of the hand sanitizer used inappropriately. Just becomes a bit of a game. So the last speaker, I think, summed it up pretty well. That was Jenny. Let's go for signage and let's rely on parental common sense.
Thank you. Comments from Stuart and Dave, both in agreement with signage. The only thing I would add, Ros, is Jane touched upon their Castle Park, which has always been our sort of flagship play area, and it's used not just by people using the play equipment, but also the sort of grassed area and the hill itself and that sort of thing. Is there an opportunity to have some sort of bespoke signage referring people to the toilets for hand sanitizer? I just think it's an opportunity that we'll have a system in place to make sure that's stocked up. And if somebody should happen to be there and they don't have their own, just point out that actually there is some available at the toilets. Just so if we're putting signage up, we might as well refer if we can, if that's an option. Are you still with us, Ross?
Are you expecting hand sanitizers outside the toilets?
Well, there's hand wash facilities in the toilets.
They are hand wash facilities, fine.
Yeah, so it's just referring people to the fact that there's hand washing available at the toilets. They might not even think to go there, but you know.
Cool. Fine. Yep.
Are we to resolve option 4
Yeah, just one more point there. Chris Harvey, I'd have no issues on health and safety issues with signage on the park. Yep, so committee members, do you need a proposal and a second to Chris, or we're just happy that...
That's okay. Yeah, I'm happy to go ahead, thanks.
Lovely, thank you very much. Thank you, members, for that. So that deals with 102.20. Moving on to 103 was street furniture.
Well, I've realised that we are now kind of at the end of the plans that we had the last time we did review all the street furniture. And what we did last time is councillors walked around their wards and did a review on barrels, signs, bins, and wrote proposals for each one. Then we got together as a group and we prioritised what we were going to do, which was the town centre. I'm just wondering whether we would like to go through that process again and get and then we can have a new plan going forward in the next financial year. So if we did that over the summer. Yeah, no secret that I would be very much in favour of that. I have big issues with street furniture, particularly on my ward, bins and benches and all sorts. So I would be in favour of that. Dave, do you have hands up? Dave Hodgkinson? Sorry, peeping. Are you still with us, Dave? No, we'll come back to you. We'll take Brenda next, please.
Well, I've unmuted now, but
there we go. Okay, Dave. Fire away.
Yeah, I've got a button on my headset, and unfortunately it stopped working, so I've had to go back to the mouse. Yeah, thank you, Ros, for sending the information out about that. It's useful for me because I wasn't on the council when that was established. But what I would find useful is to know how far we've got through the plan and what's been implemented and what hasn't. Because there wasn't, I don't think there was any update information. One of the questions is about whether one of the proposals was about having a mapping system in place, and I wasn't sure whether that was in place or not.
We did use a mapping system which we do not use now. So at the time, I did update it, but we don't subscribe to that package anymore because it was absolutely hideous and horrible, and nobody else could access it but me. I like the idea of doing it on Google Maps.
Okay.
So because that would make it really accessible to people, wouldn't it? So if we could have a chat, Dave.
Yeah, I'll have a chat with you about that then, because I've started to do it for my ward, and that is something that can easily be done throughout Thetford. So
brilliant. Let's do that.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that, Dave. Brenda, did you want to come in there?
Yeah. The last time we done this, we put in a wish list. Now, if we're going to put in wish list, Breckland might say no, 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 no. So I think we ought to be cautious when we're doing it, because you all know my walk to town is across the meadows. Now, many of the residents there want some more benches because they like to rest on their way back from town. Now, I know Breckland's going to say no, so how do we conquer this?
Good question. I think we need to, for a start, understand why Breckland might be turning things down. That's always a good starting point. And just picking up Dave's point there, Ros, the document for this item that was circulated listed what the ambition was, but not necessarily where it was at. Had it been completed? Was it in progress? If it was turned down, why? So I think that report updated as a sort of action plan of what's been completed and what's not would be really helpful for the committee, and where things were turned down. If we were aware of the reasons why, our wish list could be more realistic, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, and I'll send out a pro forma for each. But I'll speak to Dave first and find out how we do the Google Map thing, because it'd be good if we could do it alongside.
I'm a big fan of Google Maps. It's a good step forward. Chris is in favour of doing a walk around. Lovely, thank you, Chris. And Mike Brindle, you got your hands up?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I wanted to add a suggestion, please, which is that we include in the survey privately provided seats and litter bins. There is, for example, a seat at the on the green at the beginning of Nunnery Drive, which was put in memory of someone by a private person. The reason is that it does help us to give an idea of where coverage is good and where coverage is bad. And it also means that when that's seated, particular seats, as well as maybe litter bins, when they are finally at the end of their life, we would probably have to be the ones to replace it. So the request is, please can we include privately owned or provided seats and litter bins on the survey?
Okay, I can't remember what format we used to do the survey last time, but there was a process and you coordinated it, if I remember rightly, Ros.
Yeah,
So
we'll do it over the summer and we can bring something back for September, ready for budget setting in October.
Brilliant, that'd be great, thank you. Anyone got any other comments on street furniture? I think we've got a to-do list, a reason to get out and about the next few months. Lovely, thank you. 104 then is correspondence, and hopefully you can all see on the screen there some correspondence to note.
Can I just mention the Wayleave agreement, Barnum Cross? They're going to give us the money to redo that area, and just to confirm that no councillors have got any objections to that.
Okay, I've got a hands up from Stuart. Right, Stuart, is that on the Wayleave agreement, or did you want to comment on?
No, some of the others.
Okay, Jenny, is yours to do with the Wayleave agreement, or?
No, it's another one.
Okay, I'll just deal with that one first before I take you to then. Councillors generally happy with Ros's update in relation to the Wayleave? Yep, I'm not seeing anyone to the contrary. The only point I would make, Ros, having looked at the map, there's a very well-established hedgerow at the edge of Barnum Cross Common, and the Navarino belt at the top, which is very environmentally significant. And I just wanted to point it out, if they're digging trenches or anything, I'd ask that they've been really mindful of the sort of the hedgerow and the trees in that area. It looked as if it was a couple of metres away from the hedgerow, but it's hard to tell on maps and what it physically might look like in real life. So, but generally I'm happy, but I was just concerned about the environment impact.
Will do.
Thank you. Stuart, you've got a point on general correspondence?
Yes, I'm just interested in about the request for a concession at Castle Park. That this is something that would be lovely if we could have a little tea outlet by the toilets, which would help maintain the management of the toilets. But is it a definite proposal, or is it somebody just testing the water?
Somebody who's contacted us 2 or 3 times to ask whether he could have a concession there. We did do a paper on concessions, though, which was probably over 6 months ago now, and at that time councillors didn't think it was something that we should be going forward with.
Have we responded to that request as of yet? It just says request for concession. Have we said pending committee decision, or?
Yeah, I said pending views of councillors, really. So I think if councillors were to say yes, we wanted to really look at it now, then we'd bring back a paper.
Do we know what type of concession?
I think it was drinks and ice cream type thing.
Okay. When you say bring back a paper, that would mean we wouldn't.
It wouldn't happen until the autumn, I guess, would it? Yeah, we'd have missed the summer.
Yeah. Do any committee members have a strong view? I mean, I would be of the opinion that it encourages people to visit our sites and support a local trader. I would be perfectly happy with it. Does anyone else have a view? Dennis?
Yes, I have a view. Last time we discussed this, I was on the majority group that thought a concession would be absolutely wonderful in the park. And I'd just like to express my support for moving forward and seeing what we can do for them. Thank you.
Okay, Stuart?
Yeah, I think if we could work up a paper with the people's involvement, obviously what we'd probably envisage something like a kiosk like there's down by the river, by the mill, of that size. But I think, having management of the toilets would help minimise the damage that we get there, but also it provides a service for young people and make the park more usable.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands up. I don't want to rush to opinion, Ros, if you're uncomfortable with that. I wonder if we might be able to make it an agenda item for our next meeting.
Yes, I think so, because I think we should advertise If we're going to allow a concession, we should advertise to make sure we get the best candidate.
Okay, that's fine. I'm happy with that. We bring it back next time, but the principle is we're happy to look at it.
Sure.
And Jenny, did you have something else under correspondence, or has that been taken care of with that one?
No, that was taken care of. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. And Mike Rindle, please.
Yeah, sorry, it was on the last one. I was a bit slow off the mark. Just to check, perhaps with Ros, whether the Environment Agency would be likely to allow us to put a concession on Castle Park. If they're definitely going to say no, that would end the argument.
Yeah, check that out.
Yeah, check that out. Good one. Are there any other aspects of correspondence you want to make us aware of, Ros, or we can see?
I had a conversation with Larry Gray about him coming back. He was thinking about coming back early July, next week really. But we had the conversation about the risk assessments and the fact that only 6 people are allowed to gather at the moment. And the Showman's Guild hasn't produced any guidance yet, so he's going to delay it a bit longer. I didn't say no, it's just that we talked it over and then he went, oh, actually, that's going to be a bit difficult. Just if councillors, any thoughts on that one?
I do sympathise with him. It must be a terrible time for that sort of thing at the moment, but we have to follow the national advice.
Yeah.
And if the Showman's Guild advises that and the government advises it's possible, then great. But unfortunately, we're between a rock and a hard place. We've got to follow the rules.
Well, they have definitely said that fairgrounds can open, and they said fairgrounds can open, and they've said that theme parks can open. But I don't know how you do that. Having, if you can think about how the fair operates when it's in town, there's big groups all around it. I don't know how you would. So I said if we could have a risk assessment that we could see how that could be done. But Larry said he wasn't sure and he'd better wait until he got more guidance, really.
Okay. Well, the policy, the general policy for our open spaces we've discussed. And I would suggest there's enough provisions in there in terms of risk assessments and stuff. So if you receive a request and you feel it meets with the policy, go ahead, and the committee would support you in that, I'm sure. Brenda, you got your hand up?
I have. Could I find out what the complaint about the area in front of the Baptist church? Do they mean in the Baptist church garden, or do they mean the seating area?
It was the bird poo from the pigeons on the seats and the bins, which have been cleaned now.
I think that they need to repaint, Ross.
Yes, it does. It does need repainting. So we've hand painted that. I think we're going to sandblast them now because I don't think the hand painting worked too well.
Okay. Ros, before we move on from that item, are you happy with the answer you've been given about fairgrounds and stuff?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Cool. Wouldn't want us to all dash away and not answer your query, so that's good. Anything else, Ros, you want to highlight on correspondence? Are you happy with those?
Nope, that's everything.
Thank you very much. Community engagement 105. Anything to note? Any committee members got any suggestions or anything from you, Ros or Mark, if you're still about?
Nope, not really. We'll just go back to the residents at Richard Easton Way and let them know.
Okay. Just 2 points from me, Ros, on that one.
Yeah.
General housekeeping. We do need to be better as a council at updating the website. So the reference to the ALP meeting for July still has it down as the 8th of July rather than the 1st.
Right.
And I am quite big on community engagement, and we deal as a committee with stuff that the public really do care about. So if they want to join in, somebody reported to me today that they would have watched, but they can't because they thought it was next week. So we need to be much better at that. And also, I don't know how other members feel, but I had a real job this month looking through multiple emails with attachments with a lot of papers, which is great. But then I was trying to collate them all into one place to read, and I found that really difficult this month because there were so many different emails, some from Mark, some from you, not knocking the reports, just not all in one place.
Yeah.
I just wonder if I noticed Tina sent a document that was looked as if it was a web link stored on a sort of internet server somewhere.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's a way we can collate all of the papers, because they come out at different times, just update that section with all the reports, because if it's a public report and it's something we're talking about in the public session, I would want the public to have access to it, to view and have a general idea of what we're talking about. So maybe you and Chris could give some thought to that, how we make those papers more accessible and
good plan. Yeah, will do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely. Item 106, I propose that we move to exclusion of press and public. Is the committee happy with that suggestion?
I'm going to turn off the recording there, Chair.
Yes, please.
No, Mr. Chairman, you've got to read it. No cheating.
Only because they made you read it.
Yeah, Terry, you have to read it.
Okay, oh, sorry, I thought she was joking. To consider resolving that, pursuant to the Public Bodies Admission to Meetings Act 1960, the press and public be excluded for any remaining items of business on the grounds that publicity would be prejudicial to the public interest by reason of the confidential nature of the business to be discussed. And the confidential items are leases